Abortion and Other Miracles. Another day, Saint Bridget, by the very powerful strength of her faith, blessed a woman who had fallen after a vow of integrity, and whose womb was pregnant and swelling, and the conception in the woman's womb decreased, and she restored her to health and repentance without childbirth or its pangs. The woman was healed and gave thanks to God. In 1983, a right to life amendment was added to the Irish Constitution, establishing that the right to life of the unborn was equal to that of the mother. The Eighth Amendment was not removed until 2018, after decades of fighting from pro-choice groups. However, the story of abortion access in Ireland, and indeed in much of the world, is not a simple tale of restriction to availability. Long ago, during the Age of Saints, Irish holy people performed miracles that looked a lot like abortions. Hagiographies, known as vitae, were read aloud on saints' feast days. These miraculous abortions would appear alongside miracles that multiplied food and beer and that restored justice to the downtrodden. We'll focus on the motif as it appears in two texts, Cogito Sus's Life of Saint Bridget and the Vita Prima. What can these miracles show us about attitudes towards reproductive health in the medieval era? How did these stories disappear from the record? Where do these stories fit in with our modern understanding of reproductive health? The abortion miracle motif appears in the hagiographies of four saints: St. Bridget of Kildare, St. Ide McBrick, St. Connect, and St. Kieran. Hagiographies are stories of saints' lives, written to extol the power and virtue of that saint. They offered imitanda, acts that should be imitated by lay people, and admiranda, acts that could only be admired by lay people. This was an exclusively Irish miracle. No similar motif appears in the hagiography of continental saints of the time. According to Zubin Mystery, the motif first appears on the record with one of St. Bridget's vitae, either Cogito Sus's Life of St. Bridget, circa 680, or the Vita Prima, and is adapted by the writers of the later hagiographies. Let's begin by examining the vitae of St. Bridget of Kildare. St. Bridget lived approximately from 452 to 526. Cogito Sus's life is dated to around 680, but the exact date of the Vita Prima is uncertain. It could have been written before Cogito Sus's, but the translator Sean Connolly argues that the Vita Prima was written around the middle of the 8th century, because it aligns well with the political situation of that time. It is important to note that the hagiographies, no matter which came first, were written over 100 years before the events they chronicle. The authors of these works were consciously shaping this narrative to fit their contemporary political situations. We'll examine the miracle as it appears in Cogito Sus's life first. The miracle is titled, "Of the Pregnant Woman Blessed and Spared the Birth Pangs," and reads as follows. With the strength of faith, most powerful and ineffable, she blessed a woman who, after a vow of virginity, had lapsed through weakness into youthful concupiscence, as a result of which her womb had begun to swell with pregnancy. In consequence, what had been conceived in the womb disappeared, and she restored her to health and to penitence without childbirth or pain. The type of miracle that St. Bridget is performing here is certainly an admiranda, a type of saintly gift that everyday folk could only marvel at. St. Bridget is not offering instructions on how to perform abortions, nor are the audience meant to understand that they themselves should administer or receive abortions. The abortion is incidental to the real point, the power of God over nature, in this case specifically reproduction. Maeve Callan warns against seeing this motif as explicitly pro-choice. The only choice they, the saints, seem to consider is their own, and implicitly, God's. We have no indication how the nun in Cogito Sus's account felt about Bridget's miracle. The text is overtly concerned with the preservation of religious chastity. Other miracles from the text include restoring a mute girl's speech after Bridget asks if she wants to become a nun, and defending a young woman from becoming a sexual slave. The abortion motif fits into this theme nicely. It restores the woman's purity and leaves no trace of her indiscretion. This reveals the true concerns of the religious community at this time, the outward appearance of chastity and control over sexuality. This aligns with what we see in the contemporary Irish penitentials. Punishments for abortion in these texts were much less severe than fornication that led to illegitimate children. For example, someone who helps a woman obtain an abortion only does 1 year of penance, but a woman who bears a child outside of wedlock is supposed to do 6 years of penance. Abortion was definitely not considered to be equivalent to murder, nor were fetuses given special consideration over the pregnant person. While this is far from a pro-choice argument, as it prioritizes religious control over the body, it is still leagues away from a modern pro-life position. The sanctity of life is overshadowed by the sanctity of religious chastity. The miraculous abortion in the Vita Prima is remarkably similar to Cogito Sus's account. There is one important difference, however. We are shown the nun's reaction to the abortion. In this version, the woman gives thanks to God after being healed. This is a small change, but it depicts the abortion as a source of joy for the woman. St. Bridget is depicted in both vitae as assisting in all matters of reproduction, from delivery to breastfeeding, to even, in one memorable tale, paternity disputes. Abortion is here positioned as a normal part of reproductive health matters. It was, at the very least, an option open to medieval Irish women and did not seem to be especially stigmatized. St. Bridget's miraculous abortions aren't common knowledge among Catholics today. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly when these stories are removed from the history. They were certainly removed from the 19th century edition of the texts. Editors often removed stories that violated Christian doctrine. Earlier redactions by late medieval and early modern editors show some instances where the motif was removed for moral reasons. However, it remains in some of the manuscript copies. To me, this indicates that abortion was not a universally agreed upon issue for Christians until much later. In the lead-up to Ireland's 2018 referendum on the Eighth Amendment, this obscure literary motif suddenly received a lot of attention. It was used by champions of abortion to demonstrate how, historically, abortion has not been viewed as equivalent to murder and has had some degree of societal acceptance. Catholic opponents of the repeal argued that these miracles were meant to be distinct from ordinary life. They are, to an extent, both correct. The miraculous abortions were not instructional, but they do reveal a dramatically different understanding of abortion and reproductive health than the modern pro-life movement. I would argue that these stories value the life of the mother more than the potential life of the fetus. This motif provides us with a model of Christianity that can potentially accept and celebrate abortion.